Welcome to Crime Night on UnKind TV. I'm your host, Martha, and I am joined this evening by my amazing true crime co-host, Marisa.
Hi, everyone.
Tonight, we will be discussing the murder of Caylee Marie Anthony at the hands of her mother, Caylee Anthony. Marisa and I both feel that a story which sort of speaks to Casey's character is her non-graduation graduation from high school.
So basically what had happened was Casey was in her senior year of school. Prior to this, she had been a good student, but around senior year, she just decided she wasn't going to class anymore. So when her parents asked her, well, why haven't you received your cap and gown for graduation yet? She responded by saying that the school messed up and had forgotten to send it. But a week before graduation, her parents are called into the school and are told by her principal that she didn't have enough credits to graduate. When her parents asked her about this, again, she lied, saying it was the school's fault, that they had enrolled her in classes that were only half credits, or that the credits weren't transferring over to have her graduate. And instead of scolding her or punishing her, her parents covered for her and had family and friends come to this graduation and sit there and watch the whole thing. And when they thought it was strange that Casey didn't walk the stage and get her diploma, the parents said, oh, well, there was a mistake and she got her credits late, but she definitely graduated, which is a story they all accepted. And then afterwards, they all proceeded to go to a graduation party for a girl who did not graduate from high school.
I feel like that says everything about who she is and who her parents are. She's a pathological liar, and she's been raised by these incredible enablers.
Mm-hmm. Best way to describe it. They protected her at all costs.
What parent would do that? I would tell my kid, you have to finish.
Of course.
Why would you go through with a whole fake graduation, a party, invite people, and cover for her? It's not doing her any favors.
No, you're just creating this monster, and that's what she became to rely on, is that no matter what she does, she could always lie about it, and she'll always get away with it.
Oh, Casey. Well, I guess this explains why she wound up working at Universal Studios. Oh, wait. What job at Universal Studios? Well, she did work there briefly,
yes,
but she got fired.
Well, she worked in the Kodak kiosks. So, like, those people that, like, come up to you and take your picture and then try talking you into buying the picture, that's what she was doing. So, you know, it's a menial job, doesn't really take a high school diploma or anything to do.
Wait a second, Marisa. You mean she wasn't an event planner at Universal Studios?
I know. Beat still your heart. That was a lie.
I don't think this woman, she will never tell the truth about anything ever. But, well, that brings me to the timeline of what happened with her child. She got pregnant and she was worried about having the baby. She went to her mom, Cindy. She told her she had to talk to her. She let her know. And she thought she was going to be in big trouble. She was very nervous. She was young. I think she was 19 years old when she got pregnant.
Yeah, but she kept it a secret for 7 months.
Everything with this woman, I don't think it's funny what she did to Caylee, but I think it's funny when somebody is so incredibly ballsy.
Mm-hmm. The nerve it takes for this woman to say the things that she does blow my mind.
7 months she hid it, and then she's like, Mom, I'm scared. Oh no, you're going to be mad at me. It makes you think that it was right after she found out, because I heard Cindy say, oh, she had just been to the doctors and she let me know that she was pregnant. But they neglect to let you know. She let you know she was pregnant. She was going to give birth in 2 months.
Yeah. Not only did she deny she was pregnant, because people would see her and be like, she was a tiny woman. People would look at her and be like, oh, when did she do? And everyone would be like, oh, no, she's not pregnant. She's just bloated. Bloated? Bloated.
Bloated. Yes.
She even went as far to tell people she was a virgin.
Casey had all this drama about who the father was. She wouldn't tell anyone. And she had a boyfriend that she actually became engaged to. And she convinced him that he was the father. And he knew that the math was not adding up. He had a gut feeling that Caylee was not his baby. But he fell in love with her. He thought she was adorable. And the thought of anyone else being her father made him ill. He really wanted to be a dad. He wanted to be a good husband to Casey. And something went wrong, which brings us to Cindy. He got a paternity test and it turned out you are not the father. Shocker. Casey lied about that too. He didn't really care though. He was still willing to be a dad to Caylee. But it seemed that Cindy really did not want Casey and Caylee leaving the home and discouraged the marriage, and that was the end of it. And Casey pulled away from him and decided not to marry him.
Yeah, Cindy was not a fan of his. She kind of saw him as a lot like George, an underachiever, didn't really have like a plan on where he was going in life. And at the time, Cindy and George were going through a very rough patch in their marriage and really only stayed together because of financial reasons. But Jesse Grund, who is the boyfriend, was probably one of the most stand-up good men in Casey's entire life. He was willing to be a father to this child that he knew was not his. Even before the paternity test, he had tried to have conversations about who the father really is, and Casey would get angry with him, and the typical kind of like weak male who doesn't want to make the woman angry, so he just kind of lets it go. But he was willing to stand up and take care of this child because he fell in love with Caylee.
Okay. I can get yeah.
Like so many people did, by all accounts, she was adorable. And Cindy was a little bit possessive when it came to Caylee. I think she thought of herself as being more of a mom to Caylee than Casey was. She tells the story of when Caylee was born, that she took the baby first. And I saw her in a documentary say, well, this might be terrible of me. It is kind of terrible of you that you took the baby first. That's very weird.
She was often quoted, like people would say, they would hear her saying that Caylee wasn't Casey's child. She was all of our child's. And it's like, no, she wasn't. You were her grandmother, and that's a beautiful thing to have a relationship with your grandchild. But Cindy really did try to take on more of a mother role to Caylee, and Casey, by everyone's account, was very frustrated and really hated her for that.
She was asked about this in a documentary I was watching. I believe it was 48 Hours. I watched so many to prepare for this, so if I mix them up, I'm sorry. But I believe it's 48 Hours. They asked her straight out, do you think Casey resented your involvement with Caylee? Do you think she resented how close you were to Caylee and your role? And she said, no, but I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, no, she definitely resented it.
I would be very angry if I'm having my firstborn. This is my child. I'm giving birth to her, and the first person to hold her is not me. I want that baby in my arms right away. I want to see my child.
That instant connection is so important for the bond between mother and child. That's why when there's like surrogate situations, they have the person who will be raising the child be the first one to hold the baby. The baby needs to connect immediately with the mother.
So this is the situation when Caylee is 2 going on 3 years old. Casey is living with her parents. She has Caylee with her all the time. But she often tells people when she doesn't have Caylee with her that Kaylee's being babysat by Zanny the nanny. Zanny the nanny is not a real person. This will come into play later. but that's what she tells people. Anytime Caylee's not around, yeah, she's either with her parents or she's with Zanny the nanny.
And she kind of had made up this nanny after, for the first few years of Caylee's life, Casey would often kind of have her parents look after her, but they both worked. George, I believe, was in pest control and then also worked as a security officer, and Cindy was a nurse. And when they couldn't watch it, she would pawn Caylee off on friends. You know, just saying, I'm working, I'm busy, I just need you to look after them. But these friends would eventually come to realize that she was using them. They weren't getting paid. They were just being good friends. So by the time that they had gotten enough of that, boom, here comes this Zanaya Fernandez Gonzalez, a.k.a. Zanny.
Sorry, I have the giggles over this. So I have the giggles because I am being Duolingo to Marisa and helping her with the nanny's name. And whenever something is serious, I start laughing. So Marisa, go ahead, take your stab at the name again.
Oh, crap. Zenaida? Right? Okay, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
That's perfect. You got
Yay!
it. There you go.
Also
All my mockery. See? For a good cause. So Zenaida doesn't exist. Zanny the nanny, people think, and I think, was Casey's little joke referring to the street name for Xanax. Zanny.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that she was drugging Caylee regularly to knock her out so that she'd sleep and it would be easier for Casey to take her around. Her father said he always found it strange that Caylee, who was such a healthy child, not rambunctious, but energetic, that she would have these episodes where she would sleep 12, 13, 14 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day would be like a different kid.
Yeah. And I think anybody who has children or has been around children would know that that is incredibly uncommon. If you have a child that sleeps 8 hours a night, you are considered so lucky. It's very rare that children not only sleep that long, but stay asleep throughout the entire night. So for a 2-year-old to be sleeping 12 to 14 hours is unheard of.
Yeah, I know sometimes babies, like babies, not 2 going on 3, babies will sleep long stretches, but she's almost 3 years old.
Yeah,
and
she's a toddler.
And given Casey's track record, I don't think Casey was really giving this child so much physical activity, hanging out in the park all day, that she'd be so wiped out that she would sleep 13, 14 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And George, the grandfather, Casey's father, would say she was just so different the next day. It's not just the sleeping. Her whole demeanor would be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Zanny the nanny. The Zenaida that's later found by police had nothing to do with Caylee Anthony. So this was a completely made up person. The name Zenaida it's not common, but it's common enough in Florida. And Gonzalez is a very common surname in Florida. So to come up with Zenaida Gonzalez was not such a stretch. She figured, it sounds realistic. But when they found the only one that's reasonably close by, they took her and she had no idea who Caylee Anthony was.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me think even more so that the Zanny the nanny joke had to do with Xanax.
Yeah. I almost feel like she had made the joke before and then found the full name afterwards, because there were searches on her computer for the, Zenaida name. And I think she just kind of put the name in and found somebody who lived in the area. And that was Zanny now.
It's interesting that she looked that up because, like you said, she reverse engineered her own nickname.
Yeah.
What could fit? What's a good common Z name, Spanish Z name? I know that name because I've had relatives with that name, but it's not like Maria. Around the time, in the days leading up to Caylee's disappearance, Casey is playing all these games with where she's going to live. She's saying that she's moving out and she's going to be living with her ex-boyfriend Ricardo and his girlfriend Amy, but she's telling them that they'll all be able to live in Casey's parents' house, that they're going to give her their home. I mean, none of this is true. It's very strange. She's kind of living like a vagrant.
Yeah.
She's just moving around, crashing with different people. I think she was very unhappy living with her parents.
Yeah, I think that a big part of that was there was an incident where Casey had stolen a lot of money from her parents and from also her grandmother. I think the amount she really stole from her parents was about like $40,000. And when Cindy realized this, she started to threaten to take custody of Caylee. And I think that was kind of the turning point where Casey realized that she had to change her living situation.
She also stole, if I'm not mistaken, from Amy. She took Amy's checkbook and started writing checks in stores for crazy amounts of money.
She drained her checking account. This is something that Casey did a lot. She would get people's routing numbers, or she would get, the reason why she got her hands on Amy's checkbook was that all of her friends were going to Puerto Rico, and Casey said she was going to join them later on. So Amy let Casey use her car because she figured, oh, well, she's going to meet us in Puerto Rico later. She'll just drive my car to the airport. So when we come back, my car will be at the airport waiting for us. But instead, Casey used her car, stole her checkbook out of her glove compartment, and proceeded to completely drain her friend's checking account.
Wasn't that nice of her? So,
that's what friends are for.
Casey is really the kind of gal that you want around.
Yeah, that's a very common thing for her. She uses people. It's all about what you could do for her, but she doesn't do anything for anybody else. And she's kind of a leech. I mean, she is a leech, so she's not kind of a leech, but she literally just sucked everybody dry. She drained her parents' bank account. She drained her grandmother's bank account. The money that she was using to pay for Casey's grandfather to be staying in a nursing home. And Casey took all that money. She drained her friend's bank account. So any person who ever had the misfortune of really trusting Caylee Anthony with anything paid for it in full.
She would use Caylee for sympathy. Poor me. I'm a single mom. It's so hard, and people felt bad for her. I think that's why she got away with so much for so long, is because she would play that card. But I have a baby. You're not going to get me in trouble. I have Caylee. And Caylee was really adorable, and people loved her, and they let Casey get away. That's the theme that repeats over and over and over, is that Casey gets away with things because people are hand holders in her life.
That's pretty much it. And they all looked out for her for all the wrong reasons. And in the end, it's actually a detriment to her. She never learned how to be an actual person.
Part of the reason she's stealing so much is that she's lying about this job at Universal. She's telling everyone she's an event planner, and she gets up and leaves every day like she's going to work.
Yeah.
It's insane. She acts like can you imagine living like this? You get up at the same time every day, have coffee, take your shower, put your work clothes on, leave like you're going to your job, but you're not actually at your job.
Yeah, and they had actually already caught her in a lie before this, because so she had worked in this photo kiosk in Universal. She went on maternity leave. While she was on maternity leave, like when she was done with maternity leave, her job was contacting her to see, when are you going to come back? And she basically just ignored them. So they terminated her, as you would do. She pretended to still have that job. Then she pretended to have a second job where she was working at a sports authority. But when people would call up and ask to speak to her, or one day her father stopped by to surprise her and bring her out to lunch, they discovered that she never worked there and that she was lying. So they already knew that she lies about her employment. But for some reason, when she turns up and says, I got a promotion at Universal, I'm now an event planner. I went from working in a kiosk and now I'm an event planner. Nobody had a problem with it.
Again, over and over and over, everybody is just going along with whatever Casey wants. So, all right, we have this kind of loose timeline where it comes to where she's living, but we know that on June 15th of 2008, Caylee is on video visiting the assisted living facility with her grandma that morning. They were visiting the great-grandfather.
Give Papa a hug and kiss, Kate.
Caylee, give him a kiss.
It's worth noting that Cindy took Caylee in the pool later that day, the family pool, and then she removed the ladder and closed the gate. This comes into play later on because the defense tries to use this as an argument as to why Caylee could have drowned, but Cindy took the ladder out. June 16th, the last time Caylee is seen alive at the Anthony home. So this is the day that the defense claims Caylee drowned in the swimming pool. They claim that Casey and her father panicked and found her body and covered up her death. This is what happened that day though. 7 a.m. Cindy says that she left for work a few minutes before 7. Everyone at home was still asleep. 7:52 a.m. There's activity from Casey's password protected account on MySpace. She's researching Shot Girls costumes for her boyfriend Tony Lazzaro's club event. 7:56 a.m. She's using AIM to chat on the computer. Don't you miss AIM, Marisa? I look for the days.
I still have the same AIM name.
AIM, I change my AIM name all the time depending on my mood.
I'm a creature of habit. I stuck with the same one. The moment they sent me that AOL CD, I've had the same name ever since.
Wow, I like that you're consistent. Mine would be either something very the old Hollywood, or it would be depressing. Like it would be like Blanche Dubois and a series of numbers, or it'd be femme fatale, blah, 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 and like capital X and little x, you know?
Actually, I think when I first got mine, I went with Angel. Do you remember the movie The Net?
Vaguely.
With Sandra Bullock? The character in that movie, her screen name was Angel. So when I first got it, I made mine Angel, but then it gave me this random series of numbers. And since this is a name I haven't used in a long time, I don't mind saying it. It was Angel 49013. And it was so stupid. I used it for like a week and then I changed it. And that's the one I've had ever since.
So at 12:50 p.m., George Anthony says that Caylee left with Casey, that they had backpacks and they were in the car. He testifies that they left around 12:50, but then we know that Casey came back to the house because there's all this computer activity associated with her account, and her cell phone pings didn't leave the area of the home until 4:11 p.m. 1:44, Casey calls her friend Amy, and at 2:21, the call ends. We don't know what they talked about. 2:30 p.m. is the time that George Anthony testified that he left the home to go to work. It's not possible that this time is correct because there is activity, as we said, on the computer associated with Casey's accounts at 1:39. And he was not there for that. So something is not right with his timeline. I don't know if he was protecting her. I don't know if he was simply mistaken because it was so many days later that he's asked to remember, what time did you leave for work on this particular day? Like, I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone ask me what time I left to go do something 31 days ago. I have no idea. So I don't know how much of that was either a lie or just not remembering properly. What's important is that 2:49, Casey's cell phone is pinging back off towers by the house. And again, her family's computer is activated by someone using her account. Then at 2:51, and this is very important because this is something that was not presented to the jury. And this detail is what completely convinced me of Casey's guilt. And not only that she's guilty, I used to think that it was possible this was an accident and she covered it up. This is what to me indicates that it was full-blown premeditated murder of Caylee. 2:51 p.m., a Google search is made for the term foolproof suffocation. The last word, suffocation, is misspelled. The user clicks on an article criticizing pro-suicide websites that promote foolproof ways to die. So she's looking into it.
Yeah, why would somebody be searching something like that?
Followed by activity on MySpace. Wow, just looking up foolproof ways to suffocate someone. And then she read about it. So it's not like she looked it up and then clicked on something else. It's important to me that she continued to read what she found.
Yeah, it wasn't like she accidentally put something in and hit search. She opened websites. She was looking. She knew what she was looking for.
At 2:52, Casey answers a phone call from Jesse Grunt. This is the guy who was going to marry her. He says the conversation was very strange and that Casey told him that her parents were divorcing and she had to find a new place to live. 3:04 p.m. Casey disconnects the phone call from Jesse and takes a call from George Anthony. We don't really know what that was about, but her defense was that this call was her father letting her know he got to work and saying, I took care of everything, as in he disposed of the body, and telling her not to tell mom. So the reason I'm mentioning this is that this timeline, along with it, is there's what happened and there's what the defense took and manipulated out of it. She gets a call from her father. The defense says, you see, that phone call from the father, that was him letting her know I took care of the body after the child drowned.
Amazing.
Right, because we just don't know. We don't know what the conversation was about. It could have been about anything. It's 26-second call.
I mean, how many times has a parent called their kid in the middle of the day just be like, hey, just want to see how you're doing? It happens.
Whenever I talk to my parents, a 20-second call is usually, oh, did you pick up that package for me? Or did you just, okay, thanks, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that a phone call about hiding the dead body of a child would be this 26-second, took care of that thing, take care.
Yeah, exactly. I would imagine that might go for maybe a minute or more.
At 3:34, Casey calls her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro, no answer. Between 4:10 and 4:14 p.m., Casey makes 6 unanswered phone calls to her mother. At 4:11, Casey's cell phone pings show that she is at or near the house until she heads to her boyfriend Tony Lazzaro's apartment at 4:11 p.m. That's when she left. So she was hanging out at home until at least 4:11. And she kept frantically trying to call her mom. We don't know why. But by 7:54 p.m., she's spotted on camera walking around with her boyfriend at Blockbuster, and Caylee is gone. So at some point between, let's say 12-ish, 12:50 and 4 o'clock, Caylee got it. That's it.
Yeah, because when she got to Tony's house, Caylee was not with her.
No. And she went to rent a movie. I'm so disturbed by that.
Oh, horrible. Could you imagine? And let's say that you did go with the whole defense's idea of this being an accident or something. You're telling me that on the day, that very, very day, just hours before your baby girl died, you're going to go and rent movies and have a little movie night with your boyfriend? No logical person could do that.
Later, it's June 17th. George and Cindy notice that the gate to their swimming pool is open and the ladder is next to the pool. That will come into play later. June 20th, the notorious photos of Caylee Anthony are taken. She is partying at Fusion nightclub and she's in a hot body contest. And that is where the blue dress photos come from, with her grinding on people.
Mm-hmm. And supposedly her daughter's been missing for 4 days, but she's just having a great old time.
I mean, you can see why she became what's known as the most hated woman in America. I cannot, if I had a baby and my baby went missing, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed, or I would be hounding the police.
Yeah.
Like crazy. I cannot imagine going to Blockbuster and then participating in a hot body contest and grinding on other women in a nightclub.
Yeah, and if what the defense was saying is true, and this was a terrible accident, then 4 days after your baby died, you're at a bar, dancing on a table, grinding, having a wonderful time. She's smiling from ear to ear in those pictures. She is having the time of her life. She actually looks a lot freer than she does in older pictures. When you see her, you could see this kind of lightness to her, because
yeah, she looks happy.
The thing around her, yeah, she's happy. She's as happy as can be. The thing that was holding her back is now gone.
June 23rd, Tony and Casey break into her parents' shed to get gas cans for Casey's car. It had run out of gas. This is something that happened to her pretty frequently. Being the reckless person that she is, she commonly would run out of gas.
Well, when you don't have a job, I would imagine it's a little hard to keep gas in your car.
I think she's just one of these people too that like is the type of jerk that doesn't care and just always lets it go empty. I'm not saying, I mean, that's happened to all of us, but I feel like she's the type that routinely just lets it go too far, you know, and thinks, oh, I can make it. And she can't. It's just typical. You know what I mean? She's like, she's the type of person, like we all have that friend that never has gas in the car. And you're like, can you just get it together for one day? Just get it together. Really? It's on empty again?
Always. You know, like, you see that light on, it's like down below. You're like, am I going to have to push this bitch's car today?
So Tony says he watched her open the trunk that day and that he didn't see anything inside. Not that he didn't see anything, but he didn't get a chance to look into the trunk. He watched her open it. He didn't see inside the trunk, but he didn't detect any kind of odor.
Yes.
June 24th, the next day. George Anthony calls the police to report a break-in and report his missing gas cans. And then he sees Casey at his house and confronts her about taking them. George says that he goes to get them out of her car and she goes crazy. She runs past him, opens the trunk herself, grabs the gas cans out, and is screaming at him, "Here's your fucking gas cans." He says that he smells gasoline, but not any other odors.
See, I feel like that's interesting because, I mean, at this point, if we're assuming that Caylee's body is in that trunk, which I personally think it was, I don't know how far along the decomposition would have been for the smell to be so overpowering that the smell of gasoline might cover it. Honestly, I've never been around a decaying body, thank God. So I couldn't really tell you as far as like how powerful the smell is at this stage. But I know that gasoline is a very strong smell too. So it's hard for me to say. I think by the point when they start to make the comments about the smell in the car, at that point, the smell was probably overwhelming.
I will say this. One time my father borrowed my car and he spilled gasoline all over the back seat. It was a hatchback. So there's no trunk really separating you. So oh my God, every time somebody got in that car, they would go, "What the hell happened in here? What is that smell? It smells so strong." Gasoline is a very overpowering odor. So even if there is a rotting, decomposing body in the trunk, the smell of gasoline, I think, might be powerful enough at that point to hit you first.
Yes. And it's closer to them, you know. So when she's with Anthony, she's probably holding the gasoline. So he's closer to it than whatever would be in that trunk. And with George, she runs to the car and pulls the gasoline cans out before he even has a chance to get to the car. So I would imagine that would still be a strong enough odor to cover up the smell of decomposition.
I think it's interesting that she panicked and got the cans out herself. And started cursing him out.
Yeah, here's your fucking gas cans.
Well, June 30th, because Casey's so responsible, her car is towed out of a parking lot. What's found inside is her purse and Caylee's car seat. I always found that weird. Nobody seems to question this, that why her car got towed and why the parents had to go get the car.
She just abandoned it. It ran out of gas and she just left it. And oddly enough, before that happened, she had called a friend and said to her, "Oh, I think I must have hit an animal with my car because it smells really bad."
July 2nd, Casey gets a tattoo saying Bella Vita, which means beautiful life in Italian. I want to say right now, we're not impartial. If you haven't picked up on that by now, I cannot stand Casey Anthony, and I cannot believe you go to Blockbuster the day that this kid has been killed. You are in a hot body contest, dancing around. You're all happy. And then you get a tattoo saying beautiful life.
Disgusting. She's a horrible person.
I mean, she really is. It makes me understand Nancy Grace for a moment.
I know, that's not crazy enough. But yeah, if anybody can find a redeeming quality to this woman, please let me and Martha know, because just watching everything about her, I know I don't know her as an individual. Maybe she's a great conversation person, but just judging on her actions of what she's done her whole life, she's a dirtbag. And even worse than that, I believe that she's a murderer.
I don't see any redeeming quality in her whatsoever. I see someone who lies, cheats, and steals.
Yeah.
And gets away with it, and gets away with it to the point that, well, this child is an inconvenience and I want to have fun.
Yeah.
You know, why get a job when you can steal from your friends and use your baby as a pawn for sympathy? Why do I have to work at Universal? Why finish high school when I can manipulate my parents into telling everyone I finished? I don't need to finish high school.
Exactly.
Why do I need a job?
She always was able to lie.
Yeah, I don't need a job. I don't have to work. And now, why do I have to keep this kid when I can pretend she got kidnapped and I can have fun?
She's a con artist to the extreme. And it's not even that she plays cons on strangers. These are her loved ones. She nearly bankrupted her family. She took money from her friends. She just made her daughter disappear. The worst of the worst. I don't think there's a person on this planet that I think is lower scum than Caylee Anthony.
She has such an evil face. I was telling you this, that I had this idea for the longest time. I mean, I know it's not true, but Ted Bundy, Ted Bundy fathered a child while he was in Florida. He was having conjugal visits, which he wasn't supposed to be having, with Carol Ann Boone. I'm sure someday we'll cover Ted Bundy, but
absolutely.
Yeah, he's having conjugal visits with her and conceives a child. And I'm like, you know, the timeline is kind of okay. Like, it kind of works. Caylee Anthony could be Ted Bundy's kid.
She has the same dead eyes.
The same
beautiful eyes, very beautiful colors, beautiful girl, but there's no life in her eyes. The only time I ever see her with expression are those videos of her hot body contest when she's dancing it up and getting all the attention from the men, and her baby is supposedly either dead or missing in her mind.
Awful. I know, I'm making the face now on camera.
I always think about that picture of her when she's in court and she's got that stupid hairdo with the like bump on her head, and it's like half up, half down, and she's just blankly staring off into the distance. That's the picture I always get when I think of Caylee Anthony.
She's just the worst. I think of Jaws, shark eyes, like a doll's eyes, black. July 15th. George and Cindy Anthony pick up Casey's car from the impound yard. Why? Because she abandoned it and it had been towed. George notices a very, very strong odor coming out of the car. This is the first we start to hear of the odor really being noticeable. She had mentioned it to a friend, but now other people are smelling it.
Yeah, actually a very interesting story about when he picked up the car. The owner of the car lot went with him to go get the car, and when he opened the driver door, the smell hit them both. And George was a cop, so he had smelled the smell of decay before. This man who owned the car lot also made a comment that he one time had picked up a car that a man had committed suicide in, and the body had been in there for a prolonged amount of time. And that smell is something he will never forget, and that he smelled it again on that day.
And now here's where the defense came in. The car had a plastic bag with trash in it. And so they said, oh, well, she just forgot to get rid of the garbage. She left garbage rotting in the Florida sun. And it is brutal. July in Florida is brutally hot. And if you leave garbage in a car, it will smell like something died in it. Yeah. But I'm not convinced that's what happened.
Well, I mean, I think by the time the car was picked up to be impounded, the body had been at least moved for at least a day. So now the smell's kind of dissipating. You have the garbage in there too, maybe help to cover up the smell too, but on top of it, they still all smelled decomposition.
Something foul, yeah.
Yeah, now you can say garbage rotting in the trunk of a car in Florida in July would create a smell like that. But any person who I have ever seen talk about smelling a dead body always says the same thing. It's nothing you could possibly compare to anything else.
Right. That's the truth. It is. I've had things happen, not human, thankfully, but animals and little things that have gotten stuck in the hood or something like that, and you can tell it's a really vile smell.
Yeah,
It's this rancid odor that you, whoa. It's really, well, it's off-putting for a reason. You know, I think because we're animals. And so when you smell that kind of thing, it's an indication to get away from it. It's diseased.
Yes. Exactly. Something's wrong. It's definitely, it's your senses warning you from something. When you think about what the human body is, what bodies in general are, whether it be human or animals, it's organic material that's filled with all sorts of fluid and digestive stuff and everything. Now think about all of that stuff breaking down. Yeah, it's not going to be the kind of smell that an old rotting pizza is going to give off sitting in a garbage.
At this point, Cindy's getting very worried because she hasn't seen Caylee in a month. And she meets with Amy, that friend that they were all going to live with and that they had that whole thing. So she meets with Amy and she takes Cindy to the apartment where Casey's staying and tells Casey to come home. And that's when Casey tells her parents that she hasn't seen Caylee in a month and that Zanny, the nanny, kidnapped her. And that's when Cindy calls 911. There were 2 911 calls.
There were 3.
There were 3 911 calls. Marisa, I did not know there were 3. Can you elucidate?
Well, yeah, so what basically had happened was when Cindy first gets Casey from the apartment, she's had enough of the lying and the stories. She says, "Get in my car, we're going home." So Casey's in the car with Cindy. While she's in the car with Cindy, she's demanding to know where Caylee is. Casey's sticking with her story of she's with the nanny, everything's fine, don't worry about it. She's like, well, I want to see her. Where is she? And Casey is being very dodgy. So after having enough of this, Cindy calls the police. And she says to Casey, if you don't tell me what's going on, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them how you stole my car and I had to go and get it from the impound lot. And Casey's just like, do what you got to do. So she gets on the phone. She's talking to them. She tells them, I have, a person here I want you to come get. She actually drove her to the police precinct, but at that point it was already closed. So she calls up 911, says, I have a person here. I want you to come and get her. She stole my car and she's stolen money from me in the past. So they get back to the house. While they're at the house, Casey and Cindy are fighting. And at this point, Cindy calls up Casey's brother, Lee, has him come to the house, saying, I can't deal with her, you try talking to her. While they're fighting, Casey goes off to her bedroom, and that's when Lee goes and talks to her. And while talking to her, Cindy then calls the police again, saying, I don't know what happened to my grandchild. She's been missing. I have her mother here. She's lying to me. I don't know what's going on. I want the police to come. And they were already on their way dealing with this stolen car issue.
Right.
But while she's having that conversation, Lee is in the bedroom with Casey. And that's when Casey finally reveals, Zanny took Casey. I haven't seen her in 31 days. I've been trying to find her myself. So Lee comes running out, tells Cindy, and that's when you get the famous phone call of Cindy calling up the police in absolute hysterics, because now she knows for sure that Caylee's not okay. She believes that she's been kidnapped and she's been missing for 31 days.
And that's when she says on the 911 call, I'm telling you, something's wrong. It smells like there's been a dead body in that car. She backtracked on that too. She said she was desperate to get the police to come, that she was just desperate to find her grandchild. She was upset about Casey, but I will let you listen for yourselves.
There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the car.
Grandmother Caylee Anthony made a pair of 911 calls when she realized her granddaughter was missing.
I have someone here that I need to be arrested in my home. They're there right now? A possible missing child.
During that call, Caylee Anthony also accused her daughter of stealing her car and money. 2 hours later, a much more frantic call.
I called a little bit ago, the deputy sheriff saying I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her.
Your daughter admitted that the baby is where?
but the babysitter took her months ago that my daughter's been looking for. I told
The grandmother goes on to describe the missing 3-year-old. Then the dispatcher asks to speak to the toddler's mother.
my daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
And you know who has her?
I know who has her. I've tried to contact her. I actually received a phone call today.
The dispatcher gets some details from the young mother, then asks, why now?
Why are you calling now? Why didn't you call 31 days ago?
I've been looking for her and have gone through other resources to try to find her, which was stupid.
The real telling part about that conversation is not Cindy, it's Casey and how she sounds when she gets on the phone with the cops. It actually gives me chills. It's disturbing.
Marisa, we have arrived at the best part of this story. It sounds horrible to even say that, but this is the one thing that puts a smile on my face.
Mm-hmm.
The audacity of this woman. July 16th, Caylee Anthony has the gall to take the cops around Universal, the theme park, where she's claiming she still works. They already know she doesn't work there, by the way. This is my favorite part of that whole story, too. It's like, not only is the Universal thing my favorite part, the favorite part within the favorite part is that they already knew and they were just letting her hang herself.
It's really the best. I mean, because these cops have been being led on a wild goose chase. And what she's not aware of is that before they're bringing her to Universal, they've already been going and following up on all these stories she's been telling. They went to the apartments that she said Zanny the nanny lived at to find out that no one's been there for 4 months.
She gave several addresses too. One was a nursing home. One was just completely empty.
And they went to Universal and found out that she hadn't worked there in years.
Well, she goes in and the security guard is very confused. He says that she doesn't work there.
I think the reason why they actually let her in is because she's sitting there. She's going full Karen on the security guard of, what kind of operation are you working here?
Yes.
And blah, blah, blah. But then the cops talked to the supervisor and were like, listen, is it okay if she walks around if she's with us? And then they said, okay. So she's basically has a police escort to take her through the back, and that's why they let her in.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And some of us, the gall to say, yeah, sure, I work here. Come on, let's go. This is my job.
And just take them around and go all over the place and saying hi to people like, oh, hey, what's up, Teresa? How you doing, Joey? How are the kids?
I know. It's unbelievable. It's unfathomable to me. And she just, it's like as if this woman doesn't suffer from anxiety, which she probably doesn't, being something of a psychopath. She doesn't feel anxiety the same way normal people do. She thinks nothing of this.
I couldn't even imagine knowing that I'm lying. I've got 2 police officers behind me, detectives. And I'm just wandering through this place I know I don't work at, trying to take them to an office I know doesn't exist. I would be a wreck. I would be stuttering and hyperventilating. I probably would have dropped to the ground and started sobbing and begging their forgiveness, but not Casey.
No, not Casey. And this is the point when she is finally arrested and charged with child neglect, making false official statements, and obstructing an investigation. At least they've got something to hold her on, because she's been lying and lying and lying and lying. And her behavior when she gets arrested, it's just so disturbing and disquieting. The way that she is demanding to get her boyfriend's phone number. She's asked about why she's not really showing emotion. And she says, I can't cry the way I want to cry because I have to be strong with these police. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's amazing. Yeah. And the only emotion you actually see from her is anger. And it's towards her family. She's mad at her mother because her mother went on TV and was saying she doesn't know what Casey's involvement is. She's mad at her brother because he won't give her her boyfriend's phone number. She's just mad at them. And while they're sitting there trying to defend her on television, she is horrible to them on the phone.
absolutely horrific. I mean, seriously. I want an acquittal now.
Yeah, exactly. I want Tony's phone number now.
She's Veruca mixed with Vita from Mildred Pierce. We were talking about this. This whole thing really is very Mildred Pierce. I feel like if you haven't seen the film Mildred Pierce, spoiler alert, her daughter shoots her stepfather who's been having an affair with her. It's very creepy. But the whole movie, her mother coddles her and gets her out of jams and spoils her and enables her terrible behavior. And in the end, when it comes to getting away with murder, Mildred looks at her and says, I can't get you out of this one, Vita. And Vita says to her, but it's your fault as much as mine that I'm the way I am. And you can tell that's how Casey feels about Cindy. Like, yeah, okay, am I a fuck up and a horrible person? So are you.
You made me this way. It's your fault that I'm like this.
So she appears in court July 17th. She doesn't get bail. And she's told she showed a woeful disregard for the welfare of her child. Excuse me, Your Honor, I feel that is a gross understatement. Woeful disregard for the welfare of her child. Why don't you tell him about your Google searches, Casey?
Yeah.
Woeful disregard. You know, I wish she had looked up something like how to resuscitate your child. Or
yeah, maybe that would have been something that would help.
Some remorse, you know, what to do if your child, you know, accidentally takes your Zanny, or what to do if your child is unresponsive, how to wake her up. No, it's all just like how to knock her out and break her neck and suffocate her.
Yeah.
Heartless.
Well, because she probably thought she was going to get away with it, so nobody was going to check. She's just going to continue to lie and lie and lie because it always worked for her, and it's going to work for her this time too. That's literally what she thought.
July 18th, Caylee Anthony retains this wonderful attorney by the name of Jose Baez. I think she got his name from someone who was a cellmate of hers who recommended him. He was very new.
Yes.
He was very new. This case has made such a name for Mr. Baez that he's now representing the likes of Harvey Weinstein.
Real class act he is.
Such a classy guy.
He actually has a lot in common with Casey in the fact that he dropped out of school when he was in the 9th grade, and he had a child young. He ended up going to, get his GED. He went to college to study law. He didn't want to be the typical research lawyer. He wanted to be in the courtroom, in the spotlight. He wanted everybody to be watching him. He grew up really, really just entranced by Johnny Cochran. He would leave school early so he could go home and watch the OJ trial. He wanted to be that kind of showboat lawyer, and he got his wish.
So July 22nd, this is after Casey has Mr. Wonderful as her attorney. There's police testimony about stuff in the car. And so the judge decides to set her bail at $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this motion to stop the release to the media. And I think this is a big mistake. The media got it's very weird. Florida has a law that allows all these requests by the media to be honored very quickly. So the media, strange. It is strange because it tainted the case. And I think this is part of why she got off in the end. She was tried in the court of public opinion. She's tried by Nancy Grace and all of us. And because we could see jailhouse recording, 911 tape, visitor logs, we all had access to this stuff way too fast.
Yeah. So everybody had already decided.
Everybody had decided. And so I think that's what tainted the jury pool, but we'll get to that. So then she's charged formally August 5th for one felony count of child neglect. And then August 8th, it starts to get out that investigators think Caylee could have drowned on June 16th.
Well, let me have you speak to Mom, okay? No, she's right here. She's pulling at the phone. Hold on.
All right. I swear. Hi, Mom. We're not doing well, please. None of us. Lee's been sick. Dad's blown up at the media. Yeah, I heard. We'll someone just said that Caylee was dead this morning, that she drowned in the pool. That's the newest story out there.
Surprise, surprise.
We need to have something to go on.
Mom, I don't have anything. I'm sorry. I've been here a month. I've been here a month today. Do you understand how I feel?
Hold on, sweetheart. Settle down, baby.
Nobody's letting me speak. You want me to talk? Then
all right,
I'll
listen to
3
you.
seconds to see
Go,
something.
sweetheart.
I'm not in control over any of this because I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what's going on. My entire life has been taken from me. Everything has been taken from me. You don't understand. Everybody wants me to have answers. I don't have any answers because I don't know what's going on. I have no one to talk to except Jose when he comes. It's the only person that I can talk to right now because I can't even say anything to you guys besides telling you that I love you. I want Caylee. Things like that. And that's not even getting put on the air, which it should be. It's everything else, everything that I'm not saying. Again, that's all I could do was backtrack. I can't backtrack on anything. A month I've been removed from the situation. You guys are not understanding my side on this, and I'm sorry.
That leaks. This plays out over the course of several days in August. From 11th to the 13th, this man, Roy Kronk, who is a meter reader, finds a suspicious bag and reports it to the police. And it is quite literally in the Anthony's backyard. It's right there. It's in a marshy area. It had been exposed to water at different times. It's in the sun. So whatever he's found, it's the time is of the essence to recover evidence from it. Mm-hmm. So the cops come, and Kronk tells this cop that he has seen a skull and he saw bones in the bag, and the officer was rude and he gives it a quick look and just takes off. Like, they don't make anything of this. And you were telling me that he picked up the skull. He was just trying to get a better look. And later on, they point to this guy as having ruined the crime scene by touching it. Yeah, when had they just looked, there was Caylee's body.
Yeah, they basically treated him like he disturbed evidence. Meanwhile, he had called them on 3 separate occasions. And the first time, they did a quick little sweep around, oh, it's nothing, and left. The second time, they looked a little further. He said, I'll be here. I'll show you what I'm talking about. And they didn't touch anything. They just left again, saying it's nothing. So by the third time, he wants to know, and he doesn't want to call them again and have them come out there and dismiss him one more time. So he takes a stick and he pokes it into the bag from what he believes looks like a skull. He pokes it through the eye socket, holds it up, and realizes that, yes, this is a human skull, and it's a small one, and it belongs to a child. So they finally came and took him seriously. But again, like you said, later on, started holding him responsible for tampering with evidence. Meanwhile, if they had just gone there originally and took it right away, they could have taken all the pictures before it was disturbed. They could have gotten into any sort of, sterile environment they needed to, but they didn't.
So this is August, and it wouldn't be until December that they confirmed that that's Caylee.
Mm-hmm.
Can you believe? I mean, that amount of time for DNA to degrade, for the body to decompose, just evidence being lost and lost and lost and lost, all because the cop was a dick to Roy Kronk.
Yeah, and at that point, the body is the best evidence to any case. You've heard it many times that in cases where there's no body, it is very difficult to get a conviction. So when I say this was the literal most important piece of evidence, and they were ignoring it.
So Casey gets out on bail. She gets an electronic monitoring device. This is the 21st of August. She gets out. And it should be noted, this is now a frenzy. There's a media frenzy. There's people coming by the house, screaming, cursing at the parents and at Casey. I mean, the back and forth that goes on, because people are coming by, taking pictures, literally protesting, in front of their house, screaming at her. It's on one hand, I mean, I don't feel sorry for her. I feel sorry for her family.
Yeah.
But
I remember watching that every day, just seeing those protesters standing outside of their houses. And Cindy and George would fight back with them. So it wasn't like they just ignored us. So a lot of it was very back and forth and screaming at them. I would be angry too if people are protesting in front of my house.
Yeah, they were very aggressive. It was just, it made for great television that this family fought back. You know, it's like they would curse them out. He would say, I'm going to do something to you. And it was perfect.
We ate it up. We did. We ate it up. The whole thing was so made for television, and we all got into it. We all watched it.
Well, while Casey's out on bail, guess what she does? August 29th, Caylee Anthony is arrested again on charges of writing 4 checks worth nearly $650 on her friend Amy's checking account.
Amazing.
Yep, and the police have to explain that these charges are not related to the missing child. They offer her an immunity deal, I guess because they're trying to get her at this point to confess. Like, now we've got you for the checks. Now we've got you for other stuff. She says no. They tried again, and she said no a second time. So she got offered immunity if she would just, I mean, not total immunity, but they were trying to give her some kind of a deal to drop certain charges. If she would just owe up to the whole thing. Nothing. And guess what? She gets out again, September 2008. It's just crazy. I remember all of this so clearly. Like Caylee Anthony in and out of jail. People going crazy, screaming at her. There was a gun in George Anthony's car, and it's seized because they say that violates Casey's bail. And George says he was going to use it to force Casey's friends to tell him what happened to Caylee. These people just lost their minds.
They really have, yeah.
I remember it so clearly. It really was good television. It really was. But it bothers me that what's lost in all of this is that, yes, it was great reality television. You know, this Florida law lets us all see what's going on, play by play. We see this family melting down and fighting with people. We see the protesters. We see Caylee hiding and running around. And now she's in trouble for check stealing. And George had a gun and he was going to use it on Casey's friends. But we forget that Caylee was a 3-year-old girl. I heard Casey's friend say that he loved playing with her. He said she was really smart. She could count. She knew her colors and her shapes, and she was really proud. She knew some Spanish. Like, those are the things I think about little kids and how excited they are when they learn stuff like that. You know, I remember working with a little kid. He was a little bit delayed with his speech, and what a big deal it was when he said W. Like, the whole family's crying that this child learned the letter W. Those are such important things. And I think about, this is the stage that Caylee was at, you know, getting ready, you know, she's getting ready for pre-K. It's such an innocent time of life.
I think about my niece, who is 2 years old. She's going to be 3 in August. And just the amount of energy and life that's inside of this tiny little package, and how beautiful everything is to her. Everything's a new discovery and a wonder, and I get to watch her discover things that I've considered mundane for a long time, and it breaks my heart.
In September of 2008, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, who is the woman that Caylee had claimed abducted her child, didn't really exist. It just was, they found a Zenaida. Like, it's not like this is the one that had babysat for her. This woman never knew her. This is not the Zanny thing, I think, was a Xanax joke. But like we said, she reverse engineered the Zanny thing. She found the name Zenaida, and the woman that had been associated with the case sues her for defamation, which I think was warranted.
Yeah.
Because she had to have a whole slew of people harassing her too, I'm sure. In October of 2008, things escalate. Now, I'm not 100% sure how this works because they did not confirm that Caylee was dead yet. But they indict Caylee, grand jury, on first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, 4 counts of providing false information to police. And she's arrested that day, held without bond, and she's facing the death penalty. And this is before they confirm that Caylee's dead. I think they just assume it. By this point, she's been gone since June. It's now October. Nothing Casey is saying is panning out. They find the one Zenaida in the area, and she had nothing to do with Casey ever. So they're operating under the assumption that the child is dead.
Yeah, it's not a very common thing to have people brought up on charges for murder when there's no body, but it does happen. So basically, that's what they figured with all the evidence and everything, her behavior, the actions, everything that she's done. Everybody knew that this kid was dead.
Texas EquuSearch is an organization made up of volunteers. They do a lot of high-profile searches for missing persons. So they were involved in the Natalie Holloway case. They get involved in searching for Caylee. And they have to suspend the search because they turn up nothing. This is in November of 2008. And they eventually go on to sue Casey to recover resources because they spent a lot of money and time. And I think it's especially awful because they volunteer. It's like, you're really, I mean, you know that your kid is dead. Why
Basically
bother?
just like leeching off of people and their good hearts, because these are people who do this because it's the right thing to do. And she took advantage of them.
I didn't know this, but in November of 2008, this is a little bit later, after Texas EquuSearch suspended the search, the Anthonys had a private investigator, this guy Dominic Casey, who brought up some very interesting things later. He searches the area that Caylee was found in, and the whole thing was videotaped, and the family attorney denied asking him to search there. So they're like, how did he know to look there? And he says that a psychic gave him a tip, but the area was underwater at that time. It's very weird.
That's the problem with that area. It's Florida. The marshes will flood when it's summer, spring, fall. It's really only until you get into the winter, when all the foliage is kind of dying out and the water has receded, that you can really get a real sense of the area. So in November, I'm guessing it's still a little warm out, still kind of in a rainy season. And yeah, that whole area was probably underwater.
But why? Who told him?
That's a weird thing to do. I mean, it was very close to the house. Maybe nobody told him and he just searched that area because it was so close to the residence. But, I mean, he's saying a psychic told him.
The state says that they will not seek the death penalty. This is in December of 2008. And then December 11th, finally, remember, this all started in August. It's now December. A fourth tip comes in from Roy Kronk, and the remains of what seemed to be a small child are found about a quarter of a mile from the Anthony home. They get a warrant and they search the house. This is now enough. And then December 19th, the police announced the DNA confirmation that that is Caylee Anthony. I cannot believe the police got a tip from Roy Kronk saying there is a small skull and bones.
In August.
In
right?
August. It's right around the house.
How frustrating is that?
1/4 mile from the home.
And when you think about all the DNA evidence and the soft tissue and the muscle that had been eaten away that could have shown how the child was killed, were there any drugs in the system, anything, that is so important. A body is a story. It tells you what happened to it. And without that, when you just have skeletal remains that there's no trauma to, then you're screwed. And of course, being out in the marshlands, you've got animals that are going to do their own damage to it. It's probably, I mean, there's so many frustrating moments in this case that make you want to bang your head into the wall. Most of them are surrounding around Casey. But this, I think, is one of the most infuriating moments of the whole case.
It is, because it's like, you think about the climate, Florida, heat, and water. I mean, all the things that will wreck a decomposing body or accelerate the process.
Exactly.
Brutal hot weather, animals, tons of wildlife scavenging, water rising and coming. I just, why they didn't take this guy seriously, I will never understand. But by the time they get the remains, there's not that much that they can recover. So much that would have told the story, like, they didn't really have a cause of death.
No. because there was no actual trauma to the bones. So all they can go by is, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but the most suspicious thing that they find is some duct tape.
The discovery of the body is a blow to all. And January 23rd, 2009, George Anthony starts texting his family members that he doesn't want to live anymore. He's really messed up, and he has a suicide attempt. He drove to Daytona to a really seedy motel, and he just wanted to be dead.
Yeah.
That wasn't announced at the time. At the time, they said that, he was in a suicidal state, but I don't think it was known that he had actually attempted suicide and had to go to the hospital. This is used against him by Baez.
Yeah, I don't think the information came out until they were actually in the hearing.
So horrible to use that against a person, but he says, I've seen interviews with George where he says he wanted to be with Caylee, and he was just in so much agony that this beautiful little girl was really gone. I think it doesn't matter like how much it's likely that she's dead. The odds are against her being alive. Once you hear that the body's found, that your daughter did this,
there's no hope.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably convince yourself to keep going every day. She might still be out there. I mean, look at JC Dugard. And I'm from, Elizabeth Smart.
Yes.
But it happens. It does happen. But not in this case. Not in the case where it's so clear that the mother is involved.
God.
Poor guy. It really, your heart breaks for that. I know that Cindy and George are enablers and probably did a lot to create this monster. But in the end, you have to think about their grandbaby is gone. This little girl who was their everything.
And their daughter, their own daughter.
Yeah, exactly. You can't even be mad at somebody. The person who you want to take your anger out on is your own kid. I hope nobody ever has to be in that situation ever again.
There's some complications following this because you have mix-ups with not only this case, but she's also facing charges over her check stealing and stuff like that. So, it starts to get a little bit murky.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is this. So the state of Florida, they weren't going to seek the death penalty. Now they have a body. That's it. They want death penalty. They deny requests to take this off the table. That's it. They want to go maximum. She's in the middle of the whole thing with the checks. She pleads guilty. She takes responsibility for that, and she makes full restitution. And she's sentenced to time served. I think they're trying to just get all this other crap out of the way so they could focus on the big case. So the judge that had been in the case all along had to step down because he was accused of having conversations with a writer who blogged about the case.
Yeah.
And
they said that he might have had a relationship with them.
Well,
which sucks, because I actually really liked that judge because he was the one that made the comment about how in case Casey and the Truth are not friends, or it's not someone she's familiar with. But yeah, he had to recuse himself.
So they appoint this new judge. That was Stan Strickland. The new one is Belvin Perry. He also agrees to seek the death penalty. And then Cindy goes on the Today Show. God, what a circus. This is now August of 2010. So a whole year has gone by since that man found the body. She calls Casey a victim. She says she's got nothing to do with Caylee's remains. She goes on basically to help Casey. In January of 2011, so now, you have to realize this is years going by. We start this story in 2008. It's now 2011. And there's a lot of problems with Casey's attorney, Jose Baez. He's not turning over certain evidence that the prosecution's entitled to. He's prolonging things. The judge has to start saying he's going to impose fines. If the lawyers continue to have outbursts in court, they're fighting with each other over what counts, what doesn't count. And like you had said to me, this is probably the reason why they didn't hear that really important search about foolproof suffocation.
Yeah, he kept a lot of stuff.
He really did. Unbelievable. It took 11 days of jury selection. It was 5 men and 7 women. This is important because the problem is this has played out now since 2008 all over the media.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks Caylee Anthony's guilty. That's it. They want her head on a platter. You cannot take someone as a juror who comes in and says, I think she's guilty. I've seen this case on the news. So it's very hard to find someone who has not seen the case on the news. That's one thing. That's nearly impossible. And the other thing is, well, finding people who don't really take the news seriously and think they're more prone to think that there's a conspiracy or that maybe Caylee didn't do it, because pretty much anyone in their right mind thinks Caylee did it. It's so obvious. So you've got a bad jury pool. When you take out everybody who's ever heard of the case, everybody who's seen anything about it in the news, you're left with a very small group of people. And then among that group of people, you're picking from the types who think that there's a possibility that there's other interference or that there was other influences in the case when it's just so obvious. But it's kind of like
you really have to like dumb down your selection.
Yeah, it's like a no-win because you just, it's not fair. You can't pick someone who says, I already made up my mind. I feel like the media railroaded this case because they did this. You just can't. It's like with Charles Manson, that Nixon said something about him and they were like, oh, get rid of the whole jury.
But like, how do you not? It's something that was so, I don't think a person alive who is watching this doesn't remember the Caylee Anthony case. Even if you don't follow true crime, if you don't follow cases that they're proceeding, and you don't watch court dramas every single day, you heard about it. You had an opinion about it. And most of us don't live in Florida. So to find people that are in that area that you could actually hold this case in, this jury, to find people who have no opinion of Caylee Anthony at all, it has to be impossible.
So what you're left with is a jury pool that is far from optimal. So the trial begins May 24th of 2011. The prosecution says Caylee Anthony used duct tape to suffocate Caylee because the skeletal remains were found with duct tape on them. That was what actually held the skull and the mandible together. That was a big point because they say normally that won't happen with skeletal remains. The jaw will come out. It was the duct tape that held them together. I don't know if you came across that.
Yeah, well, because if you don't have the tendons and the muscles all there, it's not going to be held together. They would normally be held separate, but the duct tape was held over the mouth and the nose area. You're talking about a very small skull here, 3-year-olds. So a big piece of duct tape going across it will cover a very large portion.
It's so horrifying to think about.
Absolutely. It's the only thing I can hope for. I mean, if you're thinking for the best case scenario, the duct tape was an afterthought. She was already gone when it put on. Best case scenario also is that she wasn't conscious when it happened. Obviously, we don't know how she died. Nobody will ever know. But,
well, unless, of course, Caylee decides to write a book because she's allowed to.
Well, let's see if that ever happens. If she does, I doubt she's going to admit it.
She could pull an OJ if I did it.
If I did it. The nerve.
This is when the defense says that actually what happened is that, because all the defense has to do, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. The defense has to create reasonable doubt. That's all they have to do. They don't have to prove shit. All they need to do is create a theory, an alternate theory that in your mind, and you're talking about a jury pool here, think about this. What kind of people have not heard of this case and think it's even remotely possible, if they have heard, that maybe she didn't do it, right? So you already have people who are kind of skewed in that direction. And all they need is a theory that makes them doubt that Caylee's the one who did it for sure. That's all you need is reasonable doubt. So the defense presents the theory that the child drowned in the swimming pool, that George Anthony was very worried about Caylee, that she'd be imprisoned forever for child neglect, and he covered it up. And she failed to report the incident for 31 days because of fear of her father. Also,
here's the big part.
I will be adding the footage so that you can see this for yourselves. The way that George Anthony was hung out to dry by his daughter and her lawyer is just appalling. And I know that these people are enablers. George did not have the best history as a person. He was a liar, gambler, all this stuff. But Caylee, when she talks to him from jail, says quite sincerely, "You've been a great dad. You've been a great grandfather." You know, he says, "You can tell me anything." She says, "I know, Dad, I know." There is love between these two people. That they would then turn around and you can see the way his heart just sinks. The lowest thing you can accuse a father of is having molested his daughter. And that's what Baez comes up with. Let's say he molested her and that's how she learned to lie and hide her pain. And he says, imagine going to school after having had your father's penis in your mouth. I can't believe oh my God, to say something like that. And his face, the way he just breaks down. And in the same moment brings up, "Oh, isn't it true that you tried to kill yourself?" Wow. Yeah. Wow. Talk about going for the jugular.
Yeah, if you ever wanted to actually see somebody's heart break, you can see that when that happened to that man. When he realized that his child, who he's been protecting his whole life, her whole life, completely just threw him under the bus and made up this lie. And, you know, I'm sure we all have our own feelings about people who make up lies about child molestation. But to have that happen in the middle of a courtroom that's being televised to the whole world, being accused of that from your daughter, and then on top of that bringing up the suicide attempt, I couldn't imagine what that man was thinking at that moment.
You can just watch him visibly deflating and breaking down and crying, and they ask him if he needs a moment, and he says, "I just want to get through it."
Mr. Anthony, you were questioned by the prosecutor in reference to ever molesting your daughter. Do you recall those questions?
No, sir.
You don't recall being asked by Mr. Ashton if you had ever molested your daughter?
You have to be specific, sir, when that might have happened, could have happened. You're not being specific, sir.
First day of trial. You were asked.
And a question, yes, sir, and I never would do anything like that to my daughter.
Okay. You know, of course, that sex with a child under the age of 12 years old is life in prison, don't you, sir?
Relevance. Sustained.
You're aware of the possible penalties of child molesting, don't you, sir?
Objection. Relevance. Sustained.
You, of course, would never admit to molesting your child, would you, sir?
Objection. Argumentative. Overruled. He can answer the question if he can.
Sir, I never would do anything like that to my daughter.
My question is, you would never admit to it, would you, sir?
Sir, I would never do anything to harm my daughter in that way.
Only in that way?
Objection.
Sir.
Sustained. Right.
In January of 2009, you went, I'll give you a moment.
Need a break, Mr. Anderson?
No, sir, I need to get through this. I need to have something inside of me to get through this.
Do you need a break, Mr. Anderson?
No, sir, I'm fine.
On the 22nd of January of 2009, this is approximately 6 weeks after the remains were found, did you travel to a hotel in Daytona Beach for the purposes of taking your own life?
Yes, sir.
Why, on that particular day, did you decide to take your life?
Why that particular day I picked out, I really don't know. All I know is my emotional state, even through today, is very hard to accept that I don't have a granddaughter anymore. But for that particular day, I don't know, it just felt like the right time to go and be with Caylee.
Did you call relatives and, perhaps not literally, but say your last goodbyes to them?
Oro. I wanted to talk to my parents, my sisters. I know I called my son and my wife, and just somehow I was okay. Yes, to say goodbye for the last time.
Did any of them try to get you to tell where you were? Do you remember the content of the conversations?
No, because really, I was supposed to be going to a meeting that day, and I just decided that was the time for me to get away from all this, to spend time with Caylee.
It's really hard to watch. It really is. And you can tell he loves his daughter. Yeah. He loves his grandchild. And not only does he have to go through losing the grandchild, losing Caylee, knowing Caylee did this, very likely, right? He knows. Mm-hmm. Now you have to sit there and be used in such a way to be besmirched and maligned. And it's all lies, because the reason by the way, we're adamant that this is all made up is Baez never brings it up again. He never pushes it. He doesn't present any evidence that George ever.
It was all just shock. He just wanted to surprise everybody with this. It was disgusting. It's low down. It's the most, deplorable thing I think I've ever seen happen in a courtroom. And if it was to actually serve a purpose, it would be different. If he wanted to go back to this and bring it up again as a form of defense for Caylee, then as gross as it is, I would understand better. But you're right, he only mentions it this one time, and it's never brought up again in his opening statements.
He did this just to destroy this man. And of course, create reasonable doubt and all that, but you went for the jugular and you broke a man. Not only did this man already had a broken heart, you broke his soul. It is on the same day that Baez acknowledges that Caylee completely made up the story of Zenaida. Zanny the nanny was completely made up. Like, it just thin air, whole cloth. And then he brings up Roy Kronk, the guy who had found the remains, and he starts saying that he had moved them from somewhere else. Then he's asking, about what was the police motive in pursuing a murder investigation. Like, it's weird. He kind of like tries to make it sound like there's a conspiracy and that Roy Kronk has something to do with this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Like, he had the body all that time and then dumped it in this place. Like, he was concealing a body of a little girl just so that he can dump it in this place and get reward money for, finding her. You know what it reminds me of? That scene in Chicago when, the lawyer is doing the whole reach for the gun song. He's playing the whole courtroom. And he's putting all these things out to distract you and blind you. So, because he knows the truth, and he knows that without all those distractions, there's no way this girl is going to get off.
God, I still feel so bad about this day of the trial. And yes, of course, George denies that he ever sexually abused his daughter or that he covered up Caylee's death. I really don't think he had anything to do with the whole thing.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't. To this day, by the way, Casey's mother is in touch with her. The father wrote her off. It's done.
Yeah, he's done with her.
Nothing.
I think that's the moment in the case that he was like, once this is over, my relationship is done with her. Yep. How do you possibly look somebody in the eye after something like this?
I think that's why that moment you see him break. It's not just the lie. It's not just how egregious the accusation is. It's that in that moment, his daughter has died too. There's more testimony from her friends, Casey's friends, just basically attesting to the fact that she makes things up constantly, about having a job, that she had a nanny. There was a neighbor who testified that in June of 2008, Caylee and her boyfriend borrowed a shovel from him to dig something up, which was weird.
I think she brought it back, though, and had no dirt on it, and she didn't look like she had actually done anything with it.
Yeah, it was very strange.
She probably was trying to figure out what she could do with this body.
Another boyfriend testifies that Caylee had said that her brother had sexually molested her. Back to this again. George is called to the stand, and he says he did not smell decomposition in Caylee's car. And he says that he had used duct tape on a hole on one of the gas cans she returned to him. So again, they're trying to make the case that George is in on this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because he used duct tape once. It had to be him.
And they did say that the duct tape was duct tape that they had found in the Caylee Anthony home. But, it's because most likely Caylee Anthony killed him.
May 27th is when the tow truck company manager, you had brought this up, testified that the smell resembled human decomposition. And George is cross-examined and says he did not sexually abuse Casey, just to reiterate that. But they never, no evidence was presented of that ever. And I just want to make it clear because you and I are very sensitive on that subject, and I do believe victims. I do. I listen to women and men, especially on the subject of childhood sexual abuse is very hard for people to open up about. I almost always hear people out and believe them. But if there's one thing I deplore more than pedophiles and their enablers, it's people who lie about that. Because it's already so hard for people to get justice and be believed. And it was so obvious that this was a farce to create a clown show in the court and to distract. And there was nothing presented about it. Nothing. It was just a tactic used to try and break George Anthony and to distract the jury and to create reasonable doubt that, oh, poor Casey, sure she lied. Sure she made up Zanny the nanny, and sure she made up that she had a job, but she learned to be that way because her daddy molested her and she had to go to school with that secret. So low. Cindy testifies that she swam with Caylee and confirms that Caylee was capable of getting in and out of the pool using a ladder. And Cindy also has to testify that she believed Casey worked at Universal and had a babysitter named Zanny. While Cindy's trying to help Casey, it doesn't help that she has to confirm that her daughter was a pathological liar. But she takes back that the car smelled like someone dead. She's like, oh, that was just a figure of speech. And she had sprayed Febreze in the car. And she says that she found the pool ladder in the pool on the night of June 16th, which is the day that Caylee disappeared.
It's for this woman to have to sit there and literally every question she is asked, if she tells the truth, she's digging a bigger grave for her own daughter. But if she, if she doesn't tell the truth, then she's never going to get justice for her granddaughter. It's really insane. And as much as I don't necessarily like the Anthonys, I do have sympathy for them and the position that this horrible monster they created put them in.
Casey's friend Amy has to testify as well, and she says Casey was expressing frustration about getting help with Caylee and says that June 27th, Casey had texted her saying there was a dead animal on the frame of the car. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
So the trial's continuing on. The officers that first came to the Anthony home in July said that they did not smell human decomposition in Casey's car, but they didn't search the other family cars. They testify about Universal and how she was lying about everything. Then there are videotapes that show Casey lying to her parents in jail and denying to an officer that Caylee had drowned. Casey herself said that.
Yep.
While they're asking investigators about the process of collecting evidence from Casey's car, one of the investigators says that he did smell human decomposition. So there's some conflict here. Some of them say that they smelled it for sure. Others say they didn't smell anything, but there's different timelines.
Yeah.
Everybody says it didn't really smell in the beginning. It's later when the car's taken out of the tow yard that it stinks.
But also, when George has testified also that when he was driving home, he left the windows open to air out. So the smell that they had smelled originally when they first opened that door and they got the whiff of it that nearly knocked them on their ass, kind of being, played out a little, airing out a bit, I'm sure it still reeked enough that when Lee came to the house and walked by the car, he said he smelled it.
They found a hair in the trunk, and an FBI forensic analyst said that the hair had something called root banding, which is what happens on a decomposing body. And they tested that hair. That hair could only belong to Casey, Cindy, or Caylee. They tested it based on mitochondrial DNA. They said it was very similar to hair from Caylee's hairbrush, and they, based on the length of it, very likely belonged to Caylee. So again, this is hair that's found in the trunk of the car, one hair, and it's a hair that had evidence of decomposition. So there's evidence that Caylee's rotting body was in the trunk of the car for some time.
Yeah, and they said that the hair hadn't been treated with anything, so it was clearly Caylee's because there was no hair dye or any sort of, topical creams or all these things that us ladies do to our hair throughout the years. It was complete virgin hair.
There's also this whole procedure that was done. This guy, Dr. Voss of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So this is unusual. He says that a decomposing body gives off certain gases, which is true, but he says that he can do this procedure where they kind of trap the air from the trunk and test it later. It was a little iffy.
I have never heard of this before. I didn't know this is something that could be done. I don't know if it was experimental science or anything. I didn't know that you could test air.
It's very strange. I mean, in theory, it makes sense that I know that decomposing bodies release gases, but the idea, it just seems like there would be a lot of problems here with trying to trap the air in the trunk. It'd be one thing if you could find a way to do it before you had ever opened the trunk.
Yeah.
But once it's open, how do you know what you're really trapping? I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a forensic analyst. It just seems to me, if I were a juror, I wouldn't really take this very seriously. It doesn't seem, it's not like it's been done over and over and over. It seems like something new, but he concluded there was a high level of chloroform in the trunk. And then a chemist confirmed that there was residue of chloroform found in the trunk, but says like a lot of cleaning products have chloroform. Also, this was very weird. They used a dog, a cadaver dog, and the cadaver dog hit right on the car. In the trunk.
Right to the trunk.
Yep. And Caylee's playhouse.
Yep. Which makes me wonder, is that another place that maybe she had hid her for some time while she was trying to decide where to put her?
Yeah, or if the dog was identifying that that's the body that was in the trunk. The smell from her little playhouse. Yeah. Oh gosh. Then another dog handler testifies that his dog smelled decomposition in the backyard. And they confirm a search for chloroform. This is something that the jury was told. Chloroform made it to the jury. The thing that they didn't hear was the foolproof suffocation. That drives me crazy. But they heard about chloroform. But this freaking bogus thing, oh my God, the way Cindy tried to cover for her makes me so angry. She searched chloroform, how to make chloroform. Software analyst John Bradley, this is June 9th of 2011, testifies that someone used the Anthony computer to search the website scispot.com, science like S-C-I, not spy, scispot.com for chloroform 84 times in March of 2008. So think about this is months before Caylee died. He says that the page reloading by itself, which used to happen a lot, he says there's no way to know who searched it or who, if it's possible that it was loading by itself, but it was searched at some point in March. I mean, that is really, really, really messed up. And given how George has said that there were these weird episodes with Caylee being knocked out, who knows if Casey was using chloroform to put her to sleep. There was some discussion that the duct tape could have been moved while the evidence was being collected, the body. So the duct tape might not have been on the mouth, that it could have shifted. But again, this is all could have. It's reasonable doubt. This was the day that they had to dismiss them. Casey became very sick looking at the pictures of the remains. Wow, finally some emotion.
Some emotion.
Oh yeah, also there were maggots found, not just at the crime scene, but in the trunk. It seems very clear.
There were maggots in that garbage bag too.
Yes.
Because there was food in there. So yes, I mean, maggots aren't just attracted by human decomposition, any sort of organic decomposition. So they said there was pizza in there and that, the maggots could have been attracted by that. There were flies in there that, were attracted by organic decomposition. It's hard to say. The garbage in the car does give them a good scapegoat.
It's just so much of what fell apart is as a result of how long they took to recover the body. Because the FBI states like the hair that they found on the skull was consistent but not quite identical to the one in the trunk. They couldn't find any fingerprints on the duct tape. It was very hard to recover anything. They couldn't, not even like skin, DNA, nothing, because of the Florida sun and the water.
It's a perfect match just to completely annihilate anything that's left on a human body.
So the prosecution rests, and they didn't do that great of a job. And so the defense is told, you got to get the best of the best experts to rip apart whatever they came up with. They call this guy Dr. Warner Spitz, and he is not a nobody. This is a guy who was, I think, even involved in the JFK assassination. He's very high level, and he questions the autopsy. He says that there's nothing to indicate that there was even a homicide. He says that the duct tape could have been placed on the skull after decomposition, that the crime scene photos of the position of the hair on the skull are staged, possibly by an examiner. Like, he really shoots major holes in what the prosecution has presented. Then there's someone called a forensic botanist who challenges the theory of when the body was placed at the crime scene. They start challenging even the testing for chloroform, like whether it was actually there, how they did it. Again, all stuff to raise reasonable doubt. And it's working.
An expert witness will testify on behalf of the people who are paying them.
Yep.
So a lot of times in cases, you will have people who have great reputations, who are very well respected in their fields, but they know that they are working for the defense, and that is who is paying them, and they need to make the doubt so that the defense could have a better argument.
This was basically just days and days of the defense taking apart everything that's what you do. You find an expert to refute their expert and make their expert better. So then their expert says, oh, that hair, the root banding is very unreliable as a sign of decomposition, and points out that chloroform is a byproduct of chlorinated swimming pool water. Like, there's just so much reasonable doubt.
And it's actually really interesting when you look at how he did this. It's very similar to another very famous attorney who did the exact same thing and who also just happens to be his idol, and that's Johnny Cochran. And that's literally what Johnny Cochran did. He took all that evidence and one by one picked it apart and created theories and holes in what they had. Anything that would be concrete, he poked a hole right through it.
And Cindy tries to say that she's the one who looked up chloroform. However, this is such bull, because she says, when you type in a few letters and something pops up, which that's all happened to her. She's like, I was really looking about something with chlorophyll. And chlorophyll, please. What were you looking at about chlorophyll? What were you doing?
83 times, though. I mean, even if you did accidentally type that in, chloroform was typed in 83 times.
They proved that actually she was at work at the time. They had her time card, and they could prove that she was working at the time she said she had looked that up. There was a problem, though, with that guy who said that it was searched 84 times. He says that he admitted it was actually only one time. They say that cadaver dogs had not searched inside the house or in the parents' cars. They only looked at Casey's car. So those are all problems. Like, it doesn't mean that they didn't smell decomposition in Casey's car, but it raises reasonable doubt that they didn't check George's car, or they didn't check Cindy's car. And then another guy, a professor of chemistry, says there is no scientifically valid instrument that can identify decomposition. And there is no consensus on what chemicals are typical of human decomposition. So then Cindy is asked again. They show her a picture of Caylee on the pool ladder. And she says the ladder was in the pool on the day Caylee went missing, in the pool. And she says that she called George to ask about it since she had taken it out of the pool on the previous day after being in it. The defense shows the jury a picture of Caylee appearing to open the door that would lead out to the pool. So they're showing that she was quite capable of opening the door and getting in the pool. She was capable of opening the door, climbing the ladder, all to make the case that she died by accident and that George covered it up. There's a whole dog and pony show to determine if Casey's capable of proceeding, like if she's mentally competent. And yes, she's found to be fully competent. Just a delay tactic. They get into this whole thing trying to show that George had an affair with one of the people who was part of the search. She testifies that she did have an affair with him. But then, it's determined that it doesn't matter because... So the judge says, look, this doesn't have anything to do with how Caylee died. It could affect George Anthony's credibility because he says he didn't have an affair. She says he did, but it really doesn't have anything to do with Caylee's death. The defense tries to point out because Caylee was found with a blanket, which is a sign of remorse or comfort. I don't know. I don't know if that's to make Casey look better, if she felt a little bit guilty about what she had done. But the defense is pointing out that George Cindy and Lee had all buried their pets in the back, and it was a tradition to wrap the pets in blankets and a plastic bag. And there was always duct tape used to keep the bags from opening. Now, again, I don't know how this helps Casey, but it can raise reasonable doubt. It could be Casey learned this method because that's what they did, or it could be that they're saying, well, maybe George did it. This is now toward the end of the whole trial. The judge rules during closing arguments that the defense can argue that there could have been a drowning because there was sufficient evidence, but they could not argue that George had sexually abused Casey. There was nothing. There's an hour and a half of closing arguments from the prosecution where they offer a whole timeline of events. They assert that Casey intentionally suffocated Caylee by putting 3 pieces of duct tape over her face. Their motive is that she wanted to party and spend time with her boyfriend. They think that the defense's story that Caylee drowned and George encouraged Casey to cover it up was just nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. The defense then went on for 4 hours of arguments, insisting there's no proof of how Caylee died whatsoever, which is true. There's nothing. We don't know how she died. We really don't. We know that she died. We know the circumstantial stuff, but we don't know what was done to her exactly. And I think that countering an hour and a half with 4 hours helped them. And they end again with the argument that after Caylee drowned by accident, Casey had a panic attack and George made it all look like a murder and he's the one who put the body in the woods. There's another rebuttal from the prosecution saying that to look at the forensic evidence, that there's more than enough proof. And then it goes to the jury and, this is the deliberation everybody's waiting for, 10 hours. We wait to hear how they find Casey Anthony, guilty or not guilty. The world sits, everybody's holding their breath.
As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson.
The best feeling that I have today is that I know I can go home and my daughter will ask me, "What did you do today?" And I can say I saved a life.
Now, you know what? I'm not a preacher, and I'm not a rabbi. But there's something wrong with that. Because Caylee is dead, and her body decomposed just 15 houses away from where the Anthonys put their head on the pillow every night, every day, searching for this little girl. Now, I know it is our duty as American citizens to respect the jury system. And I do. Believe me, I do. I've struck over 100 juries. But I know one thing. As the defense sits by and has their champagne toast after that not guilty verdict, somewhere out there, the devil is dancing tonight.
Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. But she's convicted on the charges of giving false information to a police officer. She was supposed to spend a year in jail for each of those, but because of time served, she was out in 10 days. It's horrifying because Casey Anthony she's been on the run. She moves around. She lived, I think, on church property for a while. But she's alive.
Yeah, and she's living her life, and she's free.
She's free to do whatever she wants. There was some scandal not that long ago where the family's private investigator said that he had seen some really disturbing things between Casey and Jose Baez, that there was literally something said where he got Casey out of an interview with the media. She was panicking and he took care of it, and he said, "You owe me 3 blowjobs."
Yeah.
And the family private investigator said that he had seen Casey running out of Baez's office naked and giggling. and that she was paying off her legal bills with sexual favors to this man. I mean, he's such a scumbag. He comes out of that whole thing. Everybody's devastated over the verdict. It's horrible. It's horrible. Everybody knows that she did this. It's clear. But if this had not been publicized the way that it had been, she would have been convicted. Yeah. If you had a normal jury that hadn't been exposed to the media and you didn't have to pick a really small group of people that either knew nothing about the case or thought, well, maybe she didn't do it, she would have been found guilty. Had they seen that she looked up the day Caylee died, remember this, foolproof suffocation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a nail in the coffin for me.
Especially when you find the body with the tape over the nose and the mouth.
Yep. I think it is disgusting. I think the Zanny thing was her joke, her little inside joke with herself about dosing her daughter to keep her quiet and keep her sleeping so she could party. I think Casey never wanted to have the baby, and her mother influenced her decision because she had talked about giving her up for adoption. She really wanted to do that. And it was Cindy who wanted to have like another chance with the daughter and made her keep the kid. She never wanted her.
No. And she might have loved her, but I think she loved being young and beautiful and going out a lot more.
I think out of this whole thing, Baez is an even bigger villain than Caylee Anthony.
He's a slime ball. I think that's what it really is. He's just so like that stereotypical slimeball lawyer, which is why it's really not a surprise to hear that there's, a possibility he was trading his services for sex. Because, we all know she had no money. She was stealing money from everybody. And who were the people that were going to pay for him? The people she was stealing money from. They did not have any money left. They were already in a really tight spot before Casey was stealing all their money. So she just, exacerbated their bad financial situation. George had a gambling problem. He didn't earn a lot of money to begin with. Cindy was the main breadwinner. We all know that nurses are not paid nearly enough. Where were they getting this money to pay for this lawyer?
I think that it's probably true that Baez held it against her and she went along with it. I find that really deplorable, and he made quite a career out of this case.
He really has.
He made a big name for himself. She's out there. The family's been destroyed. George wants nothing to do with her. And Caylee's gone, and Caylee will not get to see life. Caylee will not get to have experiences or joy or grow up or anything.
Yeah. She'll never get to go to school. She'll never get to graduate from anything. She'll never have a first job. She'll never fall in love. It just is what it is. And that's the worst part of it all, because there's such a circus surrounding Caylee Anthony that it is so easy for Caylee to get forgotten.
I feel the same way. I think it's really easy to forget that this was a little bumbling, adorable, smart, sweet, going on 3-year-old girl. 3-year-olds are really freaking cute. That's a good age, they're really cute. They're investigating the world. They're talking more. They have so much to say about everything. They watch a movie and they want to repeat back the whole plot to you. I can't imagine, this poor kid had the misfortune of being born to a monstrous person who had been, in a way, created that way by her parents enabling her, in a way. I think the parents, and especially Cindy, she is responsible for this because she helped to cover it up. She helped to lie in court. Now they think that Casey should have done time, of course.
Yeah, hindsight.
Although Cindy says, well, I prayed to God that if Casey deserves jail time, she goes to jail. But if not, then no. And she didn't get any. Oh, come on.
Yeah, I don't know if it's delusion or whatever. This woman just needs to tell herself so that she can sleep at night. I don't know what it is with Cindy Anthony, but the lie that she lives just so that she can, I guess, make it through every day is unbelievable.
The Anthonys are still together, and it's kind of sad. I saw them in an interview say that the reason they're together mainly is nobody could ever understand this pain. It's like, I think that they wanted to leave each other. They were having problems. He's not the best husband. We know he lies and cheats, gambles, and Cindy and he do not see eye to eye on Casey or Caylee's death, but they're stuck with each other because they're just both so fucked up.
Yeah. And it's true. When you go through something like that, it's like people surviving a plane crash together. Nobody could possibly know what that experience is like besides them.
Casey knows she has gone down as the most hated woman in the world. And she gave an interview not that long ago, and she's in that black dress posing all creepy, and she thinks she's so hot. And if I were Casey Anthony, I'd never show my face again. But I cannot fathom what it is to be Casey Anthony, because I would never do this.
You have a soul.
I just can't even imagine. I can't. I would never get over it if something happened to my baby. Never.
No.
Let alone surprise, surprise.
Yeah, she's just like the amount of just pure narcissism and no regard for anybody else than yourself. It just blows my mind. I couldn't even imagine interacting with somebody like Casey Anthony. We have no proof. We are solely just going by our opinion. We can't say for certain that she killed her. In our opinion, she did. And she is a morally bankrupt person. Now, I've always had kind of two theories of what I believed happened to Caylee, and that was either that she was drugging Caylee so that she could go out and accidentally gave her too much, or used something that was stronger than what she normally uses, or whatever it may be, and it was an accident. But what I really, really, really think happened is that she wanted her youth back. She drugged her daughter, and she put the tape over her nose and her mouth and suffocated her. I think it was premeditated. I think she knew exactly what she was doing.
I think so too. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our deep dive into the murder of little Caylee Anthony at the hands of her mother, Casey Anthony. Please try to remember Caylee. This case is famous. It's notorious. Everybody knows Casey Anthony's face. The laws in Florida allowed this to become a circus, and we all know that smirk on Casey's face. We all know those major scenes. We all remember Nancy Grace saying, "The devil's dancing tonight." But try to remember Caylee, little Caylee.
Come on, Case. Come on. Come here. Come here. Come see Grammy. Come on, I got you on video. She made it.
Yeah. I can take this.
Give the video a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you're so inclined. Thank you so much to Marisa, who's an incredible co-host and helps me tremendously, and I couldn't do these without her. And leave us a comment. You can tell us off. Let me know what we got wrong. Although I really think we got pretty much everything right this time.
We really, really, really tried our best on this one.
We really did. Okay, like major, like we went point by point by point by point. So, but it's okay. You can still let me know what I got wrong because it just helps to get better. So
exactly.
You can follow UnKind TV on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll see you soon for more true crime. Martha and Marisa signing off.
Bye.